joint meeting of the 43rd Executive Council and the 24th General Conference of Ministers of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. President of the CTU, the Honorable Melford Nicholas, other distinguished members of government from the Caribbean, CTU member states, Chair of the Executive Council, other distinguished members of the Executive Council, permanent secretaries, chief technical advisors, senior government officials, Secretary General of the CTU, members of the Diplomatic Corps, heads of international organizations, sponsors, members of the media, and to all of our online participants. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to CTU's ICT Week 2021. My name is Josanne Leonard and I'm your host for this afternoon's proceedings. This meeting will focus specifically on the theme Regional Imperatives for Digital Transformation Post-COVID-19. Undoubtedly, the pandemic unleashed new challenges and amplified existing inequities, and this session will highlight some of the strategies adopted by Caribbean governments. It will also feature presentations on projects and initiatives of the CTU Secretariat and members. Most importantly, we're hoping to unleash an exchange of ideas related to how our regional leadership can continue to collectively respond to mitigate existential threats and look at ways in which digital technologies can help the region to bounce back with even greater social, cultural, and economic resilience. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Rodney Taylor, Secretary General of the CTU, to deliver opening remarks and welcome some new members to the CTU family. SG?
Thank you very much, Josanne. It's a pleasure to be here, and it is my privilege to welcome all of you attending this joint sitting of the Executive Council of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union and the Executive Council. And let me welcome the online participants. We have a very exciting week ahead of us. And as Josanne pointed out, my privilege is to welcome all of you, but in particular, the CTU, you may be aware, is an intergovernmental organization established by CARICOM heads of government as far back as 1989, and we are tasked with the responsibility of harmonizing telecommunications policy throughout our 20 member states. We've been leading the charge in many areas, including the elimination of roaming within the CARICOM space. And in fact, we have a very special guest this afternoon, the chairman of the Digicel group, who will be speaking to you on regulatory innovations for a single ICT space. We also have a whole lineup of speakers for you during the week. So I'm very excited about the week ahead. But I want to give a minute to welcome our newest members to the CTU. We are also open to private sector membership. That allows us to work with them more closely in development of policy that impacts the ICT sector throughout the region. So we're very pleased whenever we can have private sector members. And we have joining us within the last 2 months, a company you all know very well. It's known as Facebook. You may have heard of it, but Facebook has joined us as one of the newest members of the CTU. We also have the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, and that's a non-profit organization. We're very pleased to have them as well. They deal, as the name suggests, on the issue of spectrum and spectrum policy. And last but not least, we have Viasat, a company you may also have heard of that, of course, deals in satellite communication. So in that order, I'd like to invite them just to say a few words of welcome, starting with Facebook.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, thanks again for the opportunity to join not only this event but the CTU. In Facebook, as some of you may know, our mission is to through our products and services create community in order to bring the world closer together. In that sense, the CTU and the Caribbean is a great community that we wanted to join, and we wanted to be part of this closeness that we are creating. We want to actively participate in crafting and shaping the policies that would be deciding the development of ICTs and of connectivity and infrastructure in the region. We're very much happy to be able to do that through the CTU. And in that sense is that we are actively participating. I'm very happy to join. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lester. Great to have you on board. And Martha Suarez, who's the president of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance. Over to you, Martha, for a few words.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here, and I would just like to give a few words about the DSA and the reasons why we are joining CTU. So the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance is a global organization, non-for-profit, and we focus on the spectrum management activities, promoting flexible frameworks that can lead to a more efficient use of the spectrum, and at the same time to more affordable connectivity and to new systems that promote and foster innovation. So among our members, we have all the high-tech companies, and Facebook is one of our members, but also other companies like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Apple, and different stakeholders from the chipset community like Cisco, HPE, Aruba, Broadcom. But also about half of our members are non-for-profit organizations or organizations that promote connectivity, like, for example, ISOC and some universities. So for us, it's very exciting. We made the decision to join CTU because we see there are many activities going on. It's kind of being very active, the Spectrum Management Task Force, the initiatives from the members. And we would really like to be part of that, of those discussions and of that momentum. So it's really our pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for accepting us as members. And please don't hesitate to contact me or to reach out. We would really like to be very active as members, and we expect to have a long and fruitful relationship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the CTU family. Last but not least, we have Ryan Johnson of Viasat, a very critical company providing satellite services globally, and we're certainly pleased to have a company such as Viasat on board. Ryan, over to you.
Thank you, Secretary General Taylor, for the kind introduction and the opportunity to make a few brief remarks during the 43rd Executive Council and 24th General Conference of Ministers of the CTU. At the outset, I'd like to acknowledge the CTU's President, Honorable Minister Melford Nicholas, as well as all of the other distinguished ministers and esteemed government representatives. I'm sorry, of course, that we couldn't participate in person, but hopefully we'll see each other in person very soon. Just by way of brief introduction on Viasat, and we'll go a little bit deeper on who we are and what we do at the ministerial seminar on Wednesday and the regulators forum on Thursday morning. Viasat is a global broadband ISP that has celebrated its 35th anniversary just this year. In addition to using satellites, we also use some terrestrial communications in conjunction with our very high throughput satellites to change the economics of satellite delivered broadband in order to connect everyone everywhere to more affordable broadband connectivity. Among our various market segments, we've grown into a major leader in the aeronautical and maritime sectors. And we have contracts today with major airlines around the world, including the 4 major US carriers flying to the Caribbean region today: American, Delta, JetBlue, and United, as well as KLM from Europe. So that clearly we're participating in the growth of the tourist sector, the business traveler sector, and rebounding the economy for the region following the COVID-19 pandemic. But in addition to that, we also provide fixed satellite services, including, for example, in Jamaica, where we're working with the Ministry of Education to connect hundreds of schools across the island to broadband to keep kids connected to their education during this trying time. Viasat recognizes the role that the CTU has played in the region for over 30 years. We enthusiastically support the goal of continued harmonization of both policy and regulation to improve the ability for companies like ours to approach these markets and to work together with each of the governments in the region to provide benefit to the consumers. We've been engaged with the CTU for the last several years, and are very proud now to be members. As a matter of fact, I was a consultant for Viasat for a few years before joining, but my very first day joining the company was spent traveling to Guyana for the Spectrum Management Task Force in January of 2019. So the Caribbean is clearly near and dear to my heart, as well as to the company's. We look forward to continuing our relationship with the CTU moving forward and supporting its very important regional initiatives and activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Of course, I'm hooked now. I can hardly travel without connecting on my Wi-Fi in the air. So, you know, you provide a very critical service there. Thank you very much. And there's room for plenty more. You know, we certainly would welcome other private sector members to be a part of the CTU team. So without further ado, we did have a late start due to some technical difficulties, and I'm going to hand you back over to our host for this afternoon, Josanne Leonard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, SG. And again, a very special welcome to the new members of the CTU family. Okay, our very first speaker this afternoon is Mr. John Curran. John is the Chief Executive Officer of the American Registry of Internet Numbers, ARIN. He's a senior executive for numerous fast-paced internet technology companies. He specializes in telecommunications and internet services architecture and design, security frameworks, strategic project leadership, and mergers and acquisitions. So let's welcome John Curran.
Good afternoon. I'm John Curran. I'd like to thank the honorable ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for having me speak this afternoon. I'm going to give a brief presentation, sort of talking about what an interesting world we live in and how it creates the need for important movement of digital transformation post-COVID. I'm going to try to share my screen now, and hopefully that will help things along. Is everyone seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Very good. Okay. So just very briefly, ARIN is one of the 5 regional internet registries. It serves the global internet community. The 5 of us work together to coordinate the internet address space, that which allows all the devices unique identifiers to talk to one another. Collectively, each RIR is one of the 5 that handle it. Collectively, we're referred to as the Number Resource Organization, and we're dedicated to contributing to an open, stable, and secure internet. Because we're involved in every corner of the internet, if there's a piece of the internet, it's numbered by addresses provided by an RIR. We have sort of an interesting perspective, and I'm sharing ARIN's perspective here, but recognize that we're seeing these developments happen globally. I guess the most important things people need to think about is that the internet is a remarkable evolution of technology. It started out as a project. It started out as the ability of computers to talk to one another among researchers, communications professionals, academics. Over time, we got the ability to send email to one another and access websites, but it was still a communication tool as opposed to an infrastructure. And the most important thing to realize is in the last 10 years, the internet truly has become an infrastructure. It's more than just the email or the website you use. It's being used by companies, by organizations, by governments to change how they do their work. Now, we saw quite a bit of this. Anyone who's watched what's happened to various industries, when the internet came along, suddenly how we booked travel changed, or how people worked with their bank or their financial advisor changed. And so things got automated, but it was uneven, okay? The problem was that, one, not everyone had internet, and even that remains a problem today in some places. But 2 is that it takes an investment to benefit from this technology. Now, one of the things we've seen is that connected devices has gone up dramatically. Yes, it is true. We still have an unconnected world. Not everyone has the benefit, but the combination of mobile phone technology and the ability to have internet access on those same devices has meant the internet has reached corners of the globe that we hadn't quite expected. And so just prior to the pandemic, I would say we were on our way to making use of the internet as a transformation technology globally, but there were still resistance, obviously. We didn't have full connectivity, and as I said, it takes investment to leverage this. Now, I'm not going to talk about the pandemic as a positive force of change. Pandemic has caused significant issues to everyone globally, but I will say there might be a silver lining in there, and the silver lining is that very rapidly people realized that the transformation power of the internet could be used in this period of time to let people and businesses and governments stay connected with their communities without necessarily being face-to-face, without that physical presence, that in-person that we all concern ourselves about. And so, to some extent, the pandemic induced quite a bit of change in communities. I know organizations where they said telemedicine was never going to happen, and suddenly we have telemedicine because, well, we required it. It was necessary. We had businesses that said we can't do our business over the internet because we require documents or face-to-face, all of which found workarounds. So, in fact, there has been a change. The holdouts to digital and process transformation have had to face the realities of a pandemic, and that's creating a huge demand for digital skills, digital competency, and it requires an active thought about how to make use of the internet, where we've all adapted to the fact that we have a pandemic, and we've all adapted to the fact that we have to function using the internet to get our job done. But it's now time to face some of the realities. We need to make sure we understand the regulatory approaches that have to follow that, the legislative frameworks that have to follow it. The fact of the matter is that as we move everything onto the internet, sort of without choice because of the pandemic, we have to think about the fact that the internet is not much different than the real world. Things that we experienced in the real world, cybercrime, for example, happen on the internet. Issues of sovereignty that occur in the real world happen on the internet. Digital privacy, the divide we face in the real world happens on the internet. So we have had a crash course in accommodating our businesses and our functioning to the internet because of the pandemic. We need to now, governments need to think about what that means, because the slow and modest pace of internet adoption has taken a crash course in the last 2 years. And now we need to quickly catch up, because our usage an adoption of the internet has grown much faster than necessarily the frameworks behind the scene to keep the internet safe. There are real threats out there. The sharp rise in cybersecurity incidents around the globe, people should be paying attention to. These are very real events. And there's people out there and false information that's just not just information used to influence people, but there are websites and email that would take users and divert them, thinking they're talking to a legitimate business or a legitimate government, and in fact they're fishing for information, or they're leading them on a scam. And so these are very real issues that it's now urgent that we come to grip with. Bevel, who works for us at ARIN and has quite a bit of experience, he noted the same thing. Everything that you see in the real world is sitting on the internet. It's a quite an unprecedented opportunity if we can tame it and make sure these things don't end up dominating the cyber landscape. Now, there is an opportunity here. It's been an opportunity that's been before us, but now it's quite pressing. There is now more than ever the need that governments step forward and decide how this internet technology will be used, because it is being used. It's becoming stitched into your economies, whether you like it or not. The pale resistance that existed, the pandemic has all but driven through in many cases. So you have to accept the fact that we are actually on the other side now. many of the things that you would not have expected to take place on the internet in terms of business processes and how citizens access things and how government interacts with businesses are now on the internet out of necessity. And so it's not an opportunity, it's not a chance to plan everything down to the final detail. In fact, we're now catching up. There's a great opportunity to quickly adapt and figure out what the right structures are. Now, we believe that at ARIN, we believe public sector officials are the best able to shape the public policy when they're aware and informed about what's happening on the internet, not just locally, but globally. And in particular, that national governments, particularly emerging economies, have a crucial role to play in these discussions. Because, in fact, the problems that we face, stability, security of the global internet, very much the developing economies have the opportunity to set new direction. They have the opportunity to look at these in their own context and figure out what is it that I want to happen in my economy, with my citizens, with my businesses. Now, that's what ARIN's trying to do. We've embarked on a program we started several years back, but now we find it even more important. Our goal is to help facilitate the development of the internet in the Caribbean. We have a number of initiatives. So we are doing an internet public policy forum. We support the ones that take place in the region. We have a justice sector forum for public safety officials and justice officials. And we're trying to get them to have dialogue, share best practices. We're also supporting infrastructure through CaribNOG and the Caribbean Peering and Interconnection Forum to make sure that there's robust connectivity in the Caribbean. These are not things that ARIN has a particular stake in. What I mean by that is our goal is not to drive an outcome. Our goal is to make sure that the parties that need an outcome get together, can talk, and generate one. And so to that end, what we add to the table, well, we are involved, as I said, globally. We're spending quite a bit of time tracking internet developments and can bring information. As I said, we don't have a particular stake in the outcome, but we do have quite a bit of reach and quite a bit of involvement globally in internet developments, and happy to keep that process informed. And our main goal, again, is just creating dialogue and collaboration. We see by creating forums for people to come and talk about this that hopefully they can come up with solutions which are now more needed than ever, given that everything has moved to the internet in a post-pandemic world. The fact is that our goals are increasing Caribbean participation in our own community. We want to make sure that ARIN's policy on how we administer our numbers is well informed by the folks in the Caribbean sector of our region. We'd like to make sure that internet public policy development continues, that the policy development that's happening happens in an informed basis around the globe. We want to make sure that to the extent that there are shared positions, that there's insights that come out of the Caribbean or individual governments with respect to how they want the internet to operate, that those get represented globally. And so we're listening with an attentive ear. And we want to foster interregional collaboration. We're capable of amplifying any discoveries or wisdom in the Caribbean and help give it a voice in the global framework. I don't want to take too long, but I do want to leave you with the idea that that's what we're focused on, is we want to facilitate these conversations that take place. We want to make sure that people have the opportunity to know not only that that the Caribbean is in a position to consider how it wants the internet to operate in the Caribbean, but also is in a position to lead. To some extent, you have the opportunity to have these discussions in a smaller context, in a better, more informed context. It's hard for some of the large established places of the globe to try to think about doing things differently. You have an opportunity to look at it a fresh look driven by the circumstances post-pandemic. You're now on the internet, your processes are on the internet, your businesses, your citizens, your government is on the internet. So it's now time to figure out how you want the internet to work in the Caribbean. We'd like to facilitate making that happen. That's all I'd like to say. I thank you for inviting me to speak. And I'd also encourage you, if you're interested in what's happening in ARIN, we have a number of upcoming meetings, including our upcoming ARIN 48. We'd love to have additional participation. It'll be hybrid, both remote and in person. And ARIN remains committed to providing support of the Caribbean and the Caribbean community in the evolution of the internet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much. And of course, this presentation, like many, will be available on the Hublio website, on the Hublio platform. Okay, we're going to move very quickly along here now because we have some time to catch up on. And we're going to intersperse here now with a bit of entertainment. The cultural fields, as we know, of the Caribbean are populated by many unique and immensely successful artists, whether it's music, literature, art, theater, dance, you name it. And we're very excited that one of them is with us this afternoon. So folks, get ready for a scintillating performance from Barbadian musician, saxophonist, Arturo Tappin.
Hi, I'm Arturo Tappin, and I'm pleased to be part of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union CTU ICT Week 2021, bringing you greetings from Barbados. Hope you're enjoying the virtual conference. Have a wonderful time. Stay safe.
Great piece of music there from Arturo Tappin, famed Barbados musician. Okay, let's move straight into the continuing of the program here. Accelerating 21st Century Government Post-COVID-19 is the theme of this two-part presentation to be done by Junior McIntyre, who's an ICT consultant here at the CTU. He's going to be talking, well, actually, he's going to be talking on digital ID implementation for CARICOM. Welcome, Junior.
Thank you very much, Jules. And it's indeed a pleasure to be addressing the Joint General Conference and an Executive Council. And again, welcome to all our participants online. Before I get to be a bit more specific in terms of the work of the CTU and what we are doing as it relates to digital identity implementation across the region, I would just like to share a bit of background information just to give some context. So national identity systems are essentially foundational ID systems used to register citizens, and they essentially serve as an authoritative source or the single source of truth for governments to provision services to citizens across the public sector. And these services range from, paying your taxes, registering marriages, health services, purchasing property, et cetera, but also the private sector can also leverage government provisioned digital identity systems, and they can leverage those services across the financial sector, across multiple sectors, even through face-to-face modalities or over the internet. So digital IDs are essentially a foundational platform or foundation technology that can be leveraged across multiple sectors, across multiple services. And at the CTU, we would like to stress, and we normally stress the importance of inclusiveness, especially when we're talking about services that are being provisioned across a government-wide and even beyond government services across the national landscape. And the whole issue of notion of affordable broadband internet connectivity to ensure that persons aren't marginalized or left behind is very important. So those are some of the considerations at the CTU that we've been focusing on as we discuss the whole notion of digital identity. Also, there is a focus and an emphasis on the regional rollout of digital identity systems across multiple countries. So essentially harmonizing and ensuring that identities are mutually recognized across our member states. And so while we may be working with specific countries in their efforts to roll out digital identity systems, we also have a wider view of the region and the direction we would like to head in. And so that is just some background information before, just to give some context before we get into the specifics of what we do at the CTU. So digital identity intervention strategy. So on the backdrop of what I said, there's a recognition at the CTU that, a number of countries are moving in a particular direction to roll out digital identities. We have the OECS moving forward. We have Trinidad and Tobago. We have Barbados. We have Jamaica, and a number of countries moving forward and taking that bold, aggressive step to implement national digital identity systems. So we saw the opportunity to have some specific strategic interventions where we can essentially add value, we can harmonize across the region, and we could really make the whole notion of digital identities more relevant to our context as we view the regional landscape. So our first point of intervention would have been the development of a digital identity or digital ID handbook. And what we did is we leveraged resources from the World Bank, from the ITU, and from our own repositories to develop what we call a digital identity handbook for the region. And so while that digital identity handbook does have best practice embedded in it, and international best practice and standards and experiences from across the world, we too would have adjusted some of the content and made it more relevant in terms of the application of rolling out digital identities in the context of the region of the Caribbean. So that was an interesting aspect and in a point of intervention that we felt was necessary. And so we have a reference book. It's actually on our website. And we can always share the link in the chat with those who are viewing online, and that is a useful piece of resource that That's really important. And also, and just to let you know that particular CTU handbook for digital identity would have been peer reviewed by the World Bank and ITU, and also by member states as well, and civil society. So it really does capture the input from a broad cross section of stakeholders. The second intervention would have been a regional workshop. We had one on the 16th of March, and that would have been just after our previous Executive Council meeting. And again, that workshop was, I have a slide later on it, and probably you'll see some more details, but that workshop was really well attended across the region. Also, we have already started in terms of the third step, implementation support, providing implementation support for integrated digital identity systems, and we have been talking about that with our members. So those are the three areas that we've been focusing on as the CTU. Just to give you a sense of the digital ID handbook and the framework that it involves, there are 4 core areas. The first one deals with the analysis or analyzing the context and the policy development environment, and that would have been the focus of the workshop I mentioned before, where we actually did a scan of the ecosystem, looking at all your existing forms of national IDs. And in some countries, we had as many as 13 different types, and in other countries, we had quite less than that. But essentially, you have to do the first issue is benchmarking, scanning your environment, looking and seeing what you have, and sort of coming up with a plan and a strategy to move forward. And the second thing would be moving to defining a strategy and then implementing the different modalities and models of governance and architecture and design and all of those other things, and considering the technology at that phase. And of course, the fourth phase is the whole issue of operationalizing your ID, rolling it out, the whole notion of continuous improvement, monitoring and evaluation. So it's pretty straightforward and simple, and really useful. In terms of the workshop, just to give you a sense of where the emphasis lie, the focus was placed on the principles of sustainability, or in a lot of cases that you start rolling out solutions, you start rolling out whether they are government-wide solutions or even within the context of the wider landscape of national solutions. You tend to have the whole issue of sustainability as an issue. And so we did focus on that. Those are some 11 areas that we really highlighted, but sustainability was a big one for us. Also, we looked at the whole issue of operational standards, interoperability, the whole issue of the legal and regulatory framework, financial and operational sustainability, user privacy and by design as well, and the whole issue of independent oversight and governance over your identity system. So all those were areas that we focused on. Interestingly, we have a presentation on I believe it's the 22nd, the ICT technical forum, where we will delve a lot deeper into all the technical standards and solutions that are available. And so we'll have an interesting panel on that as well. Another important thing that we focus on, especially at the CTU, is the whole issue of ensuring that there is mutual recognition of the identity systems across the region. And while we recognize that countries may be moving at different paces and may have different national priorities, and they may move at different speeds, we have to establish thresholds for policy and technical standards and legal standards that should be met to ensure that we have an acceptance of a particular standard that's agreed upon by all, that will serve as a standard that would identify, this is the threshold for mutual recognition of identities across the region. And so those are the discussions we've been having with our stakeholders and engaging our members with. The other, I would have mentioned before, the digital identity workshop that was held on the 16th of March. And this slide just gives you a sense of the participation, the broad level of participation. We had a number of countries, you see them listed there, and we had over probably 40 plus members, persons participating across various countries. We also had participation from the Caribbean, the Commonwealth Telecoms Organization. The CTU, we do partner with that organization and many others. We had participation from CARICOM as well as the CARICOM Secretariat. And at that workshop, we essentially simulate the actual diagnostic review of the environment that you would use to implement sustained digital identities. And we looked at concepts and approaches, and we took all of those feedback and information that we received from those interactions, and we even updated the digital ID handbook. So that was also very, very useful. So post that workshop, we had other interventions. I know the Secretary General would have mentioned sometime earlier that the CTU have been working with the OECS. We have also been working with the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Trinidad and Tobago. On the 9th of June, we had an initial intervention with the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Trinidad and Tobago, looking at government's mandate for digital ID, looking at technical solutions, challenges, CTU's role, regional imperative. We looked at CTU's conceptual framework, and we discussed the next steps. We also had on the 1st of September a demonstration from MOSIP. That MOSIP is the modular open source identity platform for digital ID systems with the IGOV-TT, as well as the OECS. They were also present. So essentially, you're getting a sense that we've been working across multiple countries, member states. We've been working with the OECS very closely. We're working with Trinidad and Tobago, and we sort of bridging the gap. So we want people to be talking about what's happening in their neck of the woods, so to speak. We know the OECS really moving forward with the whole notion of digital identity. There is St. Lucia, there is Dominica, and a couple other countries inside of the OECS that are really moving forward and advancing the cause. So just to give you a sense of what we have been doing so far, and I'll just end with this slide. We have quite a lot on that slide, but that just gives a sort of amalgamation of everything, how the CTU can help, and how we do have the capability, we do have the ability and the experience in the region and the expertise to move things forward. The process we would adopt for the whole issue of implementing digital ID systems across the value chain would be as I said before, context analysis, defining the strategy, implementation, operating, and improving. So I would end here and hand over to my esteemed host. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Junior. Quite comprehensive. And I'm sure that you're going to get a lot of feedback because a lot of this information actually seems to not really be in the public domain, and it is so critical that others, even including ministries, and so become more aware. Okay, also on set with us is Nigel Cassimire. Nigel has a long-serving plaque on the wall of the CTU. He's been with them for the past 16 years. Nigel is a telecommunications engineer with over 30 years experience in the technical, operational, and executive management of telecommunications systems and services. And Nigel is going to give us a report on the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum 17, and also an update, I believe, on the Caribbean Spectrum Management update. An update on the update.
Yes.
Okay, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Josanne, and very good afternoon to all our attendees at this joint meeting of the 43rd Executive Council and the 24th General Conference of Ministers. One of the key areas of the CTU's work, in fact, is regional policy formulation, harmonizing policies related to ICT throughout the region. And I'll be talking on two of those areas. The first relating to internet governance, and immediately thereafter, I'll be advising of the status of our work in spectrum management harmonization. So beginning with the Caribbean Internet Governance and our update on our activities here, which will include the recently held 17th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. The CTU has been involved with internet governance work since 2005, and I would say we've remained faithful to our goals since then. we were requested by the CARICOM Secretariat to deal with this area in preparation for the World Summit on the Information Society, which was coming to a close in November of that year. And we had our first Internet governance event, Caribbean Internet Governance Forum in Guyana in September of 2005. And since then, basically our goals have been to formulate regional policy, identify in this whole broad scope of Internet governance, what are the focus areas, what are the priority areas for Caribbean consideration? And then having done so, we've sought to promote and accelerate Internet development and use in the region in different ways. The way we've done this over the years is we've taken what we call a multi-stakeholder approach. We've involved government, private sector, academia, and civil society, mobilizing these multiple stakeholders. We've convened different workshops and fora, in particular the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, and the wisdom, I would say, the collective wisdom coming from all of those various conventions we've developed into policies which we've sought to implement. In the course of doing all this, of course, we would have learned and we would have exposed a lot of stakeholders to the work of Internet governance, and that has enhanced the representation of the Caribbean on the global scale, on the global stage in different Internet-related organizations. Over the period 2005 to 2021, I'm happy to say that we can identify quite a significant list of achievements. I did mention the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. We've had 17 of those fora over the years, in addition to also ministerial seminars and many other sessions. The key product of our work, though, is a document which is the Harmonized Caribbean Internet Governance Policy Framework. And this really is the key product of the discussions that we've had. And apart from the Caribbean being the first region to have an Internet Governance Forum in the world, we also, I believe, are the first to formulate a document which we call a policy framework for the Caribbean. And I think other Internet Governance fora that are taking place around the world now are looking to produce outputs, to produce useful outputs. Whereas initially when these fora began, they tended to be more discussion fora, but now I think there's a trend that we want to see some outputs coming out. I'm happy to say that we were at the forefront of that. In the interim as well, we've always highlighted Internet governance at our Caribbean ICT Roadshow, which has been a long-running initiative of the CTU to basically demonstrate the power of ICTs and innovation for social and economic development. And we've had approximately 23 different roadshows in 18 different countries around the Caribbean. One of the implementing things that we've done coming out of our policy work has been we've sought to implement internet exchange points around the Caribbean. So we've been able to initiate internet exchange points in roughly 12 of our CTU member states. We've also spawned the development of national internet governance fora, national IGFs, and we have 3 stable multiple year ones in Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we're still working to develop national IGFs so that we continue the work of developing expertise and around the Caribbean. A long list. In terms of the Caribbean Internet Governance Policy Framework, this is what it does is it identifies the key strategic priority areas for our internet governance work in the Caribbean. And this slide shows the 6 areas. One is infrastructure for connectivity. Then there is the internet technical infrastructure. That's where we address domain names and critical internet infrastructure and so on. We also deal with legal frameworks and enforcement. So this would cover things like cybercrime, cybersecurity. The technical aspects is handled also under Internet Technical Infrastructure. We are working to deal with internet content as well, content management, and developing local content, local Caribbean content, and public awareness capacity building. I mentioned the ICT roadshows and so on, and also research where we seek to measure and report on the status of development around the Caribbean. So these 6 areas are the six key areas where we have formulated policy recommendations in this document we call the Caribbean Internet Governance Policy Framework. Our current priorities are dealing with updating the policy framework document. It was actually first issued in 2009, updated in 2013 and 2016, and we are working on issue 4.0. The pandemic has, I think, slowed down the pace of our revision a little bit, but I'll mention a little later in the presentation the strategy we have for dealing with that. As regards growing and strengthening national IGFs and communities in the Caribbean, I mentioned that before. We're also working to have some sustainable multi-stakeholder arrangements for the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. The CTU has been carrying that, and the ideal thing would be for a multi-stakeholder group to basically take over that, with CTU just being one of the stakeholders involved in it. And we also will seek to leverage our partnerships going forward. Most recently, we've had, this being the Executive Council and General Conference meetings, between March and September of this year, we've participated in the 70th and 71st public meetings of the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, ICANN. They are basically the global organization that manages internet domains, the .coms, the .orgs, and whatever internet domains exist are managed through ICANN. They had those meetings in March and June of this year. The CTU participates in ICANN's Governmental Advisory Committee, and there are certain matters, key matters bulleted there. One related to the procedures for introducing new global top-level domains like .coms, .org, and so on. Why can't we have, for example, a .CARICOM? Right? And what are the policies and procedures associated with the introduction of those things? Those are the types of things that are being discussed at ICANN. Things like data protection and DNS abuse, the domain name system abuse, and so on. Cybercrime related matters. In the recent past as well, John Curran mentioned this, that we have this ARIN CTU policy forum, which was held in May. And most recently, in the 24th and 25th of August, we had our 17th Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. I'll talk a little bit more about that right now. The theme was Caribbean Internet Governance Priorities for Post-COVID-19 ICT-Driven Development. And in these annual fora, we always seek to progress updating of our Internet Governance Policy Framework. And we did some workshops during the 17th CIGF and made some improvements in terms of the priority areas of connectivity, cybersecurity, and content management. In addition, we also explored policies related to affordable, meaningful connectivity and digital identity systems, which my colleague Junior went into some detail about just now. Very importantly, though, especially in the context of the pandemic, we have now successfully reestablished our online discussion forum for internet governance on the CTU website. And this will facilitate progress of our work between sessions of the CIGF. So that'll be an opportunity to update the policy framework and deal with discussions around any other routine internet governance matters. We are reevaluating our approaches with respect to sustainability of the CIGF work, and we'll continue doing that. And looking forward into the next quarter, We have the 72nd public meeting of ICANN, which takes place in late October. We'll be also issuing the report of the 17th CIGF, and we'll be working to stimulate and sustain the online discussion on our CTU website. Also happening in this fourth quarter, early December, in fact, is the 16th UN Internet Governance Forum. This will take place in Poland, and actually it will be a blended event. And we'll be working as well to contribute to the proceedings going on there. So what can you do? Having heard about what we're doing in terms of internet governance, our invitation basically is for you to get involved and make your voice heard. All stakeholder views are invited and welcome. If there's one thing I've learned from my exposure to internet governance work over the years, is that an individual can make a lot of difference. Individuals, corporations, civil society organizations, whomever, there's a role for each and every one of us, because we are all users of the internet. So get involved, make your voice heard. And how do you do that? You can follow the internet governance content and the forum on the CTU website at www.ctu.int, and on the sites of the other internet organizations that I mentioned, like ICANN, ARIN, LACNIC, and so on. We ask that you actively participate in our forum, and if you have any advice for us or any comments, feedback, you can also communicate by email to cigf@ctu.int. With respect to spectrum management, we have a history from 2005, and we sought to take a fully regional approach to develop capacity within the Caribbean, and also develop partnerships and collaborations with different stakeholders in this spectrum management space. Our objectives in the Caribbean are to harmonize our regulation, consistent with the idea and the goal of a single ICT space, create an environment of regulatory certainty so that will encourage investment, create economies of scale as well, because if we're getting regional investment, you find that we have service providers being able to operate in multiple countries and operate more cost efficiently. And we also, working together, seek to minimize our national resource requirements, sharing best practices and sharing resources in these small island developing states of the Caribbean. Of course, there are challenges. People are at different locations on the transition road. Our members have maybe different goals, motivations at the present time. Some of them have advanced a little further than others, so it's always a challenge to try to get harmonization in a situation like that. There's also a chance of assorted regulatory frameworks. But what we've done in terms of the CTU in our spectrum harmonization work is that we've developed a structure of two main committees. One is what we call the Spectrum Management Steering Committee, which is a high-level governmental policymaker type one, comprised of a small selection of senior government officials from our member states, 5. And the second one is the Caribbean Spectrum Management Task Force. And this one is a multi-stakeholder group, including government policymakers, regulators, service providers, academia, technology developers, and so on. And this is the real engine room of our spectrum management harmonization work, because they deal with the technical issues, they make the technical proposals for harmonization and so on. And what the steering committee does is more or less direct and guide the work and the focus of the task force. The products out of the work of these two committees are policy and technical guidelines. They're not legal mandates because CTU doesn't have that specific authority. But coming from the experts from which it comes, you find that it has significant weight in terms of the national policy making. We are trying to make the Caribbean spectrum management systems more globally influential. We We're building capacity, and we're taking part in the global fora from a competent knowledge-based basis. This is just a quick diagram of what I've just described with respect to the Spectrum Management Task Force and Steering Committee. If we start at the bottom block, we have the SMTF, that's the task force, basically comprised of multiple national representatives from our CTU member states. The little blue boxes at the bottom there show that we have the facility to create little working groups among those as might be required. And the work of the SMTF is overseen by the SMSC, that's the steering committee, and the CTU Secretariat operates a facilitating role. In the higher block is the higher hierarchy of the CTU now, where the work that comes from the SMTF and SMSC is presented to the CTU Executive Council and General Conference of Ministers. So that's kind of the hierarchy within which we work. So there is a path up to the executive level for the technical work that we do. As far as the steering committee and task force are concerned, all 5 members of our steering committee for the 2020 to 2022 term are now clarified. We did have some delays in having persons named, but the members for this term are Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Kitts and Nevis, Belize, and the Cayman Islands. And the task force is successfully operating. The chair of the task force is the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority, that's the ECTEL, and the vice chair is Jamaica. The chair and vice chair for the steering committee are still to be determined. We expect to do so probably within a month's time. Where's the work? The task force work is now managed by annual action plans. And these action plans were guided by previous work which had come out of a 2016 to 2018 strategic plan. So we've had 2 meetings so far, one in February and one in June. And the third plan meeting of the task force is in November. And we are executing our action plan. The action plan has 6 main areas which deal with regional harmonization of our frequency use of our spectrum, cross-border interference minimization, emergency telecommunications, which is an important one for the Caribbean, spectrum pricing, preparations for the next World Radio Conference in 2023, and planning the switch over to digital broadcasting. I mentioned we can form small working groups, and we form small working groups for numbers 1, 3, and 4 in my list there. And just looking ahead, we are seeking to sustain the regional coordination via our 2 committees. And we'll also be working on enhancing the efficiency of our task force processes, because it's especially so in the absence of project financing, whereby we have to use our own resources to do and progress the work that we have. We're promoting implementation of the strategic provisions nationally, and we also sustaining our valuable collaborations. We heard about Viasat and so on earlier. ITU, Canto, CTEL, and so on are very important to our work. So that's kind of where we are. And well, I guess I'm open for any questions when that time comes.
Yeah. Thank you for your attention so far. And remember, post your questions and your comments, your contributions on the live chat. They will be dealt with. And as the week proceeds, the various experts will be addressing them. And this is going to help ferment the whole discussion and the continuous revolving door feedback loop that we're trying to create here with everyone. So take a short break and we'll be right back in just a minute or 2. Well, it's welcome back to our afternoon session here at the CTU's ICT Week 2021. And we have some exciting guests for some presentations this afternoon. Hope you enjoyed your very brief coffee break. I'd like to welcome Dr. Annalee Babb. Dr. Babb is the founder and CEO of Intersections, a regional innovation cluster driver where creative minds converge to imagine and implement a better, more sustainable future. Dr. Babb's presentation is entitled Accelerating Caribbean Innovation and Intersections Initiative. And she's joining us from across the waters in Barbados. Annalee, good afternoon.
It's wonderful to be here. Excellencies, Mr. Secretary General, colleagues all, thank you so much, Rodney, for the invitation to be here to speak on accelerating Caribbean innovation. I'd like to begin, first of all, by congratulating you on your new position. I am so very excited at your opportunity, and I think you know you have a lot of friends in the Caribbean that will be supporting you in your new mandate. So congratulations, and thanks to the team at the CTU. So I'd like to talk a little bit, I'll power through this because I know we did lose some time, but talking about accelerating Caribbean innovation, pathways to recovery, reconstruction, and resilience in a rapidly evolving world. And I think that we are all aware that COVID really has changed the game. And my position is that we have run out of time, and the infrastructure that we have is no longer enough to carry us all the way. And many of you who know me would be familiar with this access model. It was a part of my PhD dissertation more years ago than I care to say. It's called the 6-layered model of societal access. And in my dissertation, I argued at the time that if we liberalize our telecoms, open up all of our telecommunication systems to competition, to liberalization and all of this, it simply would not be enough because there were different aspects of access that we were not paying attention to in the Caribbean. And 18 years later, I've lived to see that this model is still relevant to what is happening in the Caribbean. So the most basic level of access is physical access. It's the network, the internet connectivity, all of that. But then there's financial access. I call it the equity layer. The fusion of ICT and services through our economies and societies because people actually are able to participate. And they have the money as well to be able to be part of that network of networks. And the next layer is basic access. This is skills, this is education, basic skills, but how to use the internet, how do I use a computer, how do I go onto these knowledge networks and engage and so on. And if this skills layer is lacking, then it doesn't matter what our infrastructure looks like, how cutting edge it is, we will be losing out in terms of socioeconomic development. And then we have secure access. Everybody now is talking about cybersecurity, about this move in the situation with COVID to all of these virtual frameworks. There was a time when this meeting would have been held in person, and now everything is online. Are we paying enough attention to security? And policy access, the regulatory layer. It's policy, but it's regulation, it's our laws. How do we regulate for a converged era that we're living in? But ultimately, what I want to talk about today is enlightened access. I call it enlightened access. This is local innovation, knowledge and content creation. And these things are absolutely critical to us that we have to begin to think about. And I think we're doing it in pockets, but how can we institutionalize and grow our innovation within the Caribbean? And this is just another model because I like to visually be able to represent some of the concepts that I'm talking about. So if we're talking about enlightened access, the inner ring is cultural, creative, and experience industries. I believe that these are the Caribbean's key differentiators, but we operate in silos when it comes to these and other sectors. And so a few years ago, I decided to draw almost a circular representation of what an ecosystem could look like. So you have cultural and creative and experience industries at the center, new digital media, sports and leisure, content production, photography, literary arts, radio, TV, cable, web, software, arts, craft, etc. ICT is also in there as well, but the other layer, the services industries. So we have retail, legal, banking, all of these that we call services sectors. And then we have traditional industries like research and development, retail, construction, fisheries, manufacturing. And my argument always has been that we have not unleashed as sufficiently as we could the cultural, creative, and experience industries, but also services sectors to really enhance our traditional industries like retail and food and beverage. So you have examples like we can leverage the cultural, creative, and experience industries to put out creative content, product, film, videos, art, fashion that supports the growth of the sectors that are traditional, like food and beverage, like wine, rum, and spirits. We live in an era now where people want to experience. They don't just want to drink the rum. They want to experience how it was made and the story and history behind it. So this, I think, is a very important visual for us to understand that we need to move from silos to systems of regional innovation where we unleash the cultural and creative and experience industries to do a number of things. And this is where we come to my new initiative called Intersections. And I believe that one of my colleagues who is on my board, I'd like to shout out Mr. Paul Acton. I believe he is listening in on this presentation. But Intersections is what we call a cluster driver. It's designed to do a number of things. But we say it's where collaboration, creativity, technology, and innovation meet at the intersections of all of those industries and sectors that you just saw earlier. That's where new ideas happen, new value is created. Our mission is that we empower innovators and creators from all walks of life to collaborate, originate, accelerate, incubate, and benefit from their groundbreaking ideas. So how do we do this? We have a number of value propositions that we're looking at to accelerate creative and tech innovation. So our idea is that, first of all, people need to co-locate, whether it's virtually or actually. You need to cluster people, get them talking to each other across disciplines, across sectors, nurturing world-class creative and tech innovation by offering specialized facilities, services, programs, knowledge, and support. And I'm not sure if my colleagues from Barbados are here, but if they are, a special welcome and good evening to Senator the Honorable Kay McConney, who is the Minister of Innovation, Science and Smart Technology in Barbados. I don't know if PS Charlie Brown is here or Mr. Clifford Bostick, but in 2019, the ministry did something that I thought was pretty forward-thinking and created a Smart Barbados Week. And the event itself was very, very illuminating, educational. People were excited about it. But what I found most interesting was that when all of these sessions were finished in the evening, this is before COVID, that we would have a reception. People had some drinks and some canapes and little finger foods and so on. And we had a cutoff time to leave the facility by 9:30, and we had a difficulty getting people to leave because they were just talking and sharing ideas and so on. So I think in the Caribbean that we really do lack co-location spaces where creative people and tech and crossing different specializations can meet together and discuss ideas and develop new value. But part of what I think is very important is that we can land global startups whose value propositions match Caribbean and Latin American technology, innovation, and creative markets, attracting and nurturing new talent, thinking, ideas, intellectual property, technology, and capabilities. And why do I know this? Because I'm the founding CEO of Invest Barbados. And when we founded it, I, again, was astonished at the number of startup companies around the world, from places like Spain, like Sweden, Europe, all over the world, that because the Caribbean and Barbados has great ICT infrastructure, would be prepared to move their young families to these regions to work. Now, we had to wait for something as unfortunate as COVID to happen for us to realize that we can attract these particularly young professionals to work remotely from here. And we've seen this take off in Barbados with the Barbados Welcome Stamp. I know other countries are doing it as well. But the interesting thing about it in my mind is that it's not just people as in human bodies that come, they're bringing their money, they're bringing their networks, their knowledge, their ideas, their innovation, and their IP as well. And if we can get them to stay here, and perhaps the next value, part of the value proposition is leverage. We believe that in Intersections that we have a collaborative cluster model that would be appealing to startups in the Caribbean, but also to many of these global startups that are looking to expand their mandates from Barbados and countries like this into Latin America and the world. So if you can actually have these companies landed here and joint venture with local talent to grow their companies, but also leverage that local talent that may create their own value propositions and own value from their ideas, we can help them by discovering, financing, developing, distributing niche indigenous content, services, solutions that are distinguished for creative excellence. But in doing all of that, we know that the internet is just hungry for content. So while we are teaching and training and helping these companies to grow, we can also be learning, taking videos, doing content and so on, so that proven creators, innovators, and business development specialists are sharing their knowledge. They're producing content, services, solutions to engage, to entertain, to inspire, enrich, and transform. And we take that and we put it on the web. We share it with people who are interested also in learning. And that is another value proposition, another value stream. But what is particularly important to me is that there is, I believe, a gap in the Caribbean where a lot of us who have learned many things and so on, and we have grown, but we're not teaching necessarily the next generation. And this is something that young people keep telling me, that a lot of what we call the mavens in the Caribbean and Barbados, those who have made it in their areas of specialization, don't necessarily have opportunities to nurture the next generation of global creators and innovators who do good while doing well. And this is what Intersections is also focused on. So these are our niche areas of specialization, the well-being economy. I'd like to focus particularly on the well-being economy, the efficiency economy, and creative economy, because we've already done a tremendous amount of work in these areas. And I think if Minister McConney is present, she would be aware that the Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Smart Tech in Barbados has done a lot to seek to foster efficiency in the economy. This is something that we believe we need to take as Intersections to the Caribbean as well. So while I'm no longer with the Ministry of Innovation, Science, and Smart Technology, I believe that what we learned there, we can help other Caribbean countries to improve their efficiency. And how do we do this? One of the projects that we worked on while I was with the government of Barbados the last 3 years was something called a Barbados Tech Accelerator for the delivery of digital public services. And what we found is that there are ideas all over Barbados and the Caribbean that can help governments to be more efficient. But the problem is that we don't have structures and mechanisms to identify the people who have those ideas and then help them to develop them. On the well-being economy, for example, we developed the BIM Safe application, mobile app, the BIM Safe ban, and Mr. Ian Withers, I don't know if he's here, but he developed the SHAPE application that has helped us manage the COVID-19 pandemic and travelers into Barbados better than I think many countries around the world. So this is something that the Prime Minister just came up to me after a meeting and she says, Annalee, I need a wristband, I need a mobile app. These are the things I need to manage and we didn't have any structure at the time, no resources, but we put a team together. We told the Prime Minister and Cabinet what we needed. They gave us what we needed and we developed a solution. And if we could do it that quickly under these COVID conditions, I know that we could do it in a number of other areas to help the well-being economy, health and wellness, but also the efficiency economy and the creative economy as well. And I'll give some examples on the creative economy to close. We are hosting, Barbados is hosting UNCTAD 15. And what we know is that inspiring bespoke content services solutions are trending globally, driven by demographic shifts, smart technology, new media, culture, and creativity. I've always believed from the time I wrote my dissertation in 2003 that small islands, and the Caribbean in particular, have the ability to produce and market quality creative content and social impact technology at competitive costs. And next week, UNCTAD 15 is hosting the Creative Industries Trade Digitization Forum completely virtually. I am one of the co-lead organizers of that forum, along with Mr. Adrian Green, who is in the cultural and creative sector. And together, our team has put together a forum that I think you will find very inspiring. You can see the possibilities for yourself by going to www.unctad15.bb, but you can also register, and that's the link. I can share it individually with you. But we have, for example, created something called Newbridge City, which is an interactive digital universe by Anna Macon. Mr. Omar Kennedy is the lead on that. It's an isometric atmosphere role-playing game where visitors learn about Barbados and the forum itself. We also have Tales in the Forest. Some people might say, with the virtual situation being what it is and people not being able to meet in person, can we even have theater anymore? Well, we have Ms. Michelle Hinkson Cox has done Tales in the Forest, which is a digital theater production based on Caribbean folklore from many of our islands. It's produced by her company, Rima Acts, and the Barbados Community College Theater Department. And then we have an amazing digital NFT art exhibit led by Zoe Osborne. And she has curated, she and Anika Small, some amazing digital art and talked a little bit and shown us how we can turn art into NFTs or non-fungible tokens. So these are the idea is, how do we wed technology with creativity and culture and heritage and history to take what we do in the Caribbean to the world? And all of this requires very robust ICT and telecoms frameworks. These are the only things. We have to grow the Caribbean economy. We cannot maintain our development. Barbados lost 30,000 jobs initially last year with COVID. Tourism is not going to come back as quickly as we want it to. How do we move on from there? So these are just some of the ideas that we are developing at Intersections and with our colleagues. And my invitation to you is to engage the world with us. Now is the time for new intersections. We welcome opportunities to explore, collaborate, and realize a shared vision for Caribbean transformation. Thank you to Mr. Rodney Taylor, the CTU, and all of our partners. I believe that the CTU has made a commitment to us to partner with us and help us to help the Caribbean drive innovation. We look forward to partnering with Caribbean governments that are interested in landing some of the companies that we have identified, but also joint venturing and growing local creativity, innovation, and culture. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Annalee. Quite an exciting presentation and so much to and of course, well, you know where my heart is, so I don't even have to give a back announce on that. But I'm sure you're going to get a lot of feedback, because this is it's innovative. It's an idea whose time has come, and certainly I know that people are just going to be, they're really going to be truly inspired by these possibilities. And we have people. Sure.
May I say, Josanne, that I want to just also give kudos to Josanne. If you tune in next Wednesday to our Creative Industries Trade Digitization Forum, Josanne is our moderator for our opening high-level session where the Prime Minister and others will be speaking. And Josanne will be helping to moderate that. And she's also moderated a couple of the panels within our forum. So thank you, Josanne. We're looking forward to partnering with you as well moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, sister. Standing in the wings would be Denis O'Brien, the chairman of Digicel, and Dr. Didacus Jules, who is the Secretary General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, who's also going to update us on another exciting, I'm using the word exciting. I mean, I guess I'm being a bit excitable because what is really coming through in the sessions is that there's so much granular work and there's so much visionary work taking place. And it's really how do we bridge the gap in terms of not just getting information out, but creating the opportunities and the spaces, as Nigel Cassimire said, for everyone to be involved in this process. And first of all, you have to be aware. The awareness counts. And then wherever you sit, whether you're in the private sector, whether you're a micro, small enterprise, whether you're a government institution, a ministry, or what have you, how we can in fact begin to coalesce and collaborate. So I know that there's a lot going on behind the scenes to try and get Miss Welsh online, and it might be a good time for me to recognize some of the people who really made this entire week, CTU's ICT 2021 week possible. Platinum sponsors, Huawei and Liberty Latin American Caribbean, that's Cable and Wireless. Gold sponsors are Cloud Carib and ARIN. Silver sponsors are Digicel, TSCT, Viasat, and LACNIC. Bronze sponsors are ICANN, Cullen International, and the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And the live stream partner is the Internet Society. And of course, I haven't had a chance yet to go and explore Hublio, but that's the platform that the CTU is using. And I'm told by the staff here that once you register, of course, you're up on the platform, you can go have a virtual experience, visit country booths, look at specific content. I'm told that there are even some interactive games there in which you may be able to win a prize or two. I'm not too sure. I'll fact check that one. So it's all interactive because most of CTU's ICT Week 2021 is happening virtually, with very few exceptions in terms of people here at the CTU and maybe some locally based presenters. So I think Annalee Babb, Dr. Babb, well, she doesn't mind if I call her Annalee, actually kicked off this afternoon with the, kicking the ball down the field. I mean, she knocked it out of the park as far as I'm concerned, but then I have a bias. I think that the possibilities, talking about opening up the possibilities, looking beyond what we know traditionally, and how we may bring some of these partners, for example, who are part of the CTU and others who may be looking on to be part of moving the needle in the Caribbean, really leveraging the kinds of the strengths that we have, tapping into what already exists, because it's not like we're creating things from scratch. We're not doing things, particularly in areas like the creative economy and the well-being economy, and so as pointed out by Annalee, a lot of the work has already been done. And as she referred to, the makers, the people who've already, the maders, the people who've already made it. There's so much for us to draw on and for us to build on as Caribbean people. How do we leverage all of this digital know-how, all of these technologies to really push the Caribbean agenda, to not just merely talk about us being able to punch above our weight, but actually being able to realize real opportunities for Caribbean people and Caribbean societies. On a beautiful Caribbean afternoon, welcome Mr. Denis O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien is no stranger to this region. He's an Irish entrepreneur, and he may not remember me, but I met him donkey years ago, as we say in the Caribbean, when he first came to Jamaica up on the North Coast. And since then, of course, he's become a household name. He's founded several companies. He's a philanthropist who is deeply involved with global humanitarian issues. Of course, he's the chairman of the Digicel Group, and he's going to share his thoughts with us on the regulatory innovations for a single Caribbean ICT space digital economy. Welcome, Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure to see you again after so many years. And you're wearing my favorite color.
Oh,
which is
wonderful.
Great.
I thought it would be green. I thought it would be the luck of the Irish.
So good afternoon, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to join you today, and I'd like to thank you all and particularly the CTU for the opportunity to address this important meeting. The CTU ICT Week is a very important part of the regulatory calendar, and we've had some very fruitful discussions, also some debates over the years. This year, Digicel celebrated 20 years since we first launched our services in the Caribbean. 20 years ago, the governments and regulators of the region had a vision of a liberalized, competitive telecommunications market, and it has been a great privilege for us to participate in this. Today is also a time of radical change mainly because of technology, but also opportunity. The global digital economy is growing at breakneck speed, and it is vital that the Caribbean fully participates and also fully benefits from this. We need a common set of rules for the digital economy across the Caribbean to ensure that investments in networks can continue, society is protected from threats, and governments can maintain tax revenues as everything shifts online. I would like to spend the next few minutes sharing our thoughts with you about how we can take action as a Caribbean region. Starting with investment challenges. Operators face significant regulation in some of the smallest countries in the region. There is also a constant need for reinvestment in technology, from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, and of course, fiber. The absence of scale means that operators face significantly higher rollout costs, lower profitability, lower cash flow, and a reduced investment ability. In Digicel, we invest between 16 and 18% of our revenues annually in our networks. This is not sustainable, and I'm sure Flow, CTAR, TST, and other operators in the region face a similar challenge. We also compete with big tech OTTs who offer an array of telco services such as WhatsApp, calls, or video streaming apps who do not comply with regulations, and their abusive behavior cannot be challenged, nor do they pay license fees, USF, spectrum fees, sales tax. They all need to be licensed like the rest of us. We have been discussing this issue now for about 5 years, but it's coming to the point where we need to ask ourselves whether we want Silicon Valley big tech companies to be the providers of telecommunications services in the Caribbean by the end of the decade, or whether we want the companies that you know and trust and who will provide employment and pay tax in this region to continue. Online harm is a big issue. It's a major threat to society. We are all familiar with the growing list of scandals and abuses by Facebook and mounting evidence of big tech crushing small competitors, spreading hate speech, disinformation, and conspiracy theories. These are not issues that are happening in faraway places. The Caribbean people are being used to experiment. Cambridge Analytica developed their techniques to use Facebook to distort democratic elections in Trinidad and Tobago before applying these to the Brexit and Trump campaigns. When the EU introduced data protection rules for children, Facebook applied these immediately in the French West Indies, but did not bother to protect the children of other Caribbean nations. The Caribbean has witnessed an explosion in hate speech, ISIS terrorist content, and other harmful illegal content spread and amplified by OTT platforms. Only a couple of days we saw Nicki Minaj spread a nonsense anti-vax conspiracy theory on social media that nearly undid all of the good work Caribbean governments and CARICOM are doing to promote COVID vaccines. Many countries have acted to introduce laws and regulations to protect society. Online harms are undermining the fabric of our society, and the Caribbean badly needs, in my mind, rules to protect against these also. Another important question facing Caribbean governments is how to fund public services as tax revenues decline because local businesses are being replaced by big tech. The big tech giants need to contribute to societies where they earn their profits and also their revenues. Loss of tax revenue affects the world unequally and affects the pace of digitization as well. Without investment, the Caribbean risks falling further behind developed regions. The World Economic Forum warns that this will lead to the digital exclusion of workers, bringing livelihood crisis and rising social tensions in the coming years. In parallel, giants such as Facebook and Google make vast profits from advertising in Caribbean countries without paying any taxes locally. It's just hard to believe how they have got away with it for so long. Yesterday, I attended the annual meeting of the UN Broadband Commission, and for the past 2 years have been involved in the working group studying financing plans for broadband in the 21st century. Out of a global population of 7 billion, it's hard to believe that 3.5 billion people do not have access to broadband at present, and stakeholders from Africa, Asia, and other countries around the globe have said enough is enough. The only way to finance the $450 billion needed to connect these people in rural parts of Africa and Asia and in South America and even in the Caribbean is for everyone who derives an economic benefit from these new broadband networks to contribute a portion of their revenues to fund network build-outs across these countries. This is the only way that broadband can be rolled out in some regions at affordable prices. An infrastructure fund, possibly under the auspices of the IFC or the World Bank, would finance a substantial portion of this $450 billion network rollout, and telcos, Facebook, Google, and others would have to give up a percentage of their revenues to reach these remote customers. It's a completely new way at looking at things. For example, Facebook has WhatsApp to compete with telecoms operators, and Facebook earns on average approximately between $2.40 and $2.50 per month per user with no infrastructure costs. And they have 2 billion customers. There are many useful examples of new laws in the European Union, the United Kingdom, and other countries that the Caribbean can now look to in order to identify the best possible way forward. As I mentioned earlier, a key problem we have in the Caribbean region is scale. We have different rules and regulations across the region, and countries with relatively small regulatory bodies with limited resources. This approach served the region well during the period of the liberalization of the telecommunications market, but we must recognize that this model is no longer adequate for the modern global digital economy. The digital economy is rapidly becoming the economy. Without a new approach in this region, every service imaginable, from food and grocery delivery to medical consultations, to media, to communications, to transport and tourism, will in the future be provided by big tech platforms. There will be no local companies left to regulate. We need to ensure that the same rules apply in every Caribbean country. This can be achieved at Caribbean or CARICOM level by agreeing a set of principles based on the best international practice. Caribbean nations could then apply these principles by amending their local ICT laws. Big tech might try to pressurize individual Caribbean countries as they has in the past, but they cannot ignore the region if it acts in unity. We could ensure that regulators have the scale required to ensure that big tech giants follow local rules by sharing resources and by enhancing the role of the Caribbean Competition Commission. Looking at the laws in other jurisdictions, there are 7 important principles that the Caribbean can include in its legal framework. First, require the local legislation of big tech platforms above a certain threshold. South Korea now requires Google and Facebook to appoint a local representative for user complaints and to respond to regulatory inquiries. Second, make provisions of ICT law mandatory for big tech platforms. For example, a duty to cooperate with the police and a duty to file financial accounts with the regulator and details of traffic usage annually, as happened in South Korea. And of course, pay local taxes, including corporation taxes. Third, make it easier to request the identity of anonymous posters of hate speech and defamatory statements from big tech from local courts. Fourth, the competition law has emerged as a key tool enabling regulators to protect local consumers and entrepreneurs. The UK and the US base their approach to big tech on competition law. In Australia, how competition law was used to declare big tech dominant and prevent abuses in media markets. Caribbean countries should include competition law provisions in their ICT laws that apply to all providers of digital service, regardless of their location. Resources can be focused through the CARICOM Competition Commission to support regulators across the region. ICT laws must mandate that digital service to consumers are subject to local law. Platforms cannot be allowed to avoid local law by stating that their services are subject to the laws of California. 6, there needs to be a clear requirement that illegal content such as child abuse images, which are horrific in my mind, or terrorist content must be removed within a given time frame. A schedule of other prohibited and harmful material could be agreed regionally and published by ministers. Big tech should have a duty to report illegal content to regulators and provide an annual transparency report setting out how they dealt with complaints, illegal and also harmful content. 7th, introduce credible and uniform penalties for non-compliance. The European Union has fines of up to 10% of turnover, plus daily fines for non-compliance. It's interesting to look at the Australian example. I also mentioned a moment ago that South Korea law has required big tech to register locally and to provide reports to regulators. Let me give you some more detail on the Australian example that I mentioned. In Australia, big tech giants were profiting from local news media content without paying for it. In other words, they were taking other companies' stories, etc., and not paying for it, threatening the extinction of local news media companies who bore the cost of producing news but were losing massive amounts of advertising revenue. The Australian Competition and Consumer Protection Commission used its competition law powers to establish that Facebook and Google were abusing their dominance in markets for digital advertising. Then in February 2021, Australia introduced a News Media and Digital Platforms Bargaining Act that obliges big tech giants to negotiate and agree commercial terms with local publishers and broadcasters for their use of their content. The big tech giants quickly complied, and Australian newspaper and media companies are now getting paid by big tech giants for their content. A similar system has been set up in France. Google has established a $1 billion fund to pay for content it uses in these countries. At present, regulators in the Caribbean cannot act to help local media as they do not have competition law powers. There will be huge ramifications for democracy in the Caribbean if the newspaper and radio and television industries die because citizens will be relying for Facebook for their news. Turning to taxes and returning to the question of taxes, the G7 big tech tax proposals will mainly benefit wealthy countries. Emerging markets are more vulnerable to the tax advising strategies of big tech giants. A recent report on taxing the digital economy proposes that emerging countries should apply digital taxes to big tech to make up for the difference in their tax contributions. Now, big tech will argue that the answer is to charge VAT on advertising, which was put forward by Facebook at a recent meeting of the UN Broadband Commission. But, you know, I don't think anybody falls for this. VAT is actually paid by the buyer of this advertising services and is not a big tech tax as such. And they must be required, in my mind, to fess up and declare to national governments what revenues and what profits they are making in every country in the Caribbean. It will quickly become clear that they have few costs, but make extraordinary profits. They pay no taxes in contrast to operators like Digicel, Flow, TSTT, CETAR, and others who pay taxes and fees averaging about 30% of revenues. Many jurisdictions have decided to take action to impose digital taxes on revenues earned locally. In January 2021, Kenya introduced a tax of 1.5% on all digital service, regardless of where a company is based. Even in the United States now, a number of states have introduced digital taxes, particularly states like Maryland, West Virginia, Texas, Connecticut. I believe that the Caribbean should follow these examples and use a portion of additional tax revenue to fund regulation and future infrastructure. In conclusion, the Caribbean is too small to take action to protect itself, and there are examples from other countries now that are helpful. We can create a true CARICOM ICT space by agreeing key principles, including these into national ICT laws. Facebook and other big tech platforms are all in the ITU, trying to block and delay processes, including the report that I spoke about on 21st century financing, which we approved yesterday. And it is something that we need to make sure doesn't happen in the Caribbean. Australia, the UK, South Korea have all led the way. We can look to these examples and we do not need to reinvent the wheel. Digicel is very willing, as I'm sure a number of operators are, to help, and I propose that we establish a working group of ministers, regulators, and operators from this region to draft the legal amendments that are required. Thank you once again for affording me this opportunity to address your meeting, and I wish you the best of luck and continued success of the CTU. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Brien, and tremendous amount of information there, but you really let the cat among the pigeons, and it's an idea. Well, again, ideas as time has come because of all of the things that you have cited. I was actually, this is my sheet. I was busy making notes, and I think that certainly the team at the CTU here and other operators are going to be taking it on board, notwithstanding the fact that big tech is part of CTU and part of the whole conversation, but it's
should be,
very, very necessary conversation. And I'm sorry you don't have time for Q&A, but
I'll do Q&A if you need to. If there's no problem, whatever suits you.
Well, I'm gonna take my cues from the production team because I know we have two other speakers in the wings.
It's fine.
And if you're still around and we have time for questions, I'm sure that you have a lot coming at you. So thank you. And I got the bit about the red because I know what the color of Digicel is. I was jogging a little bit with the green and the Irish.
Well, you got blue at the back, so you're being democratic.
Thank you so much. Okay, next up is Sybil Welsh, who is the Senior Project Specialist at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and she's joining us to talk about digital payment initiatives. Do we have Sybil on now?
Yes, good afternoon, all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. It's all
Okay.
yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon and sincere thanks for having the ECCB at this very important conference. We appreciate the ability to share our Dcash with the rest of the world. Thank you again as we talk about Dcash. This we know is our digital EC, and that's really to ensure that we provide a faster, cheaper, safer means of effecting payments and transfers in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. And I want to anchor this in the strategic priorities of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank for the region, which is the ECCU payment system modernization. We know that this payment system is a critical component of our region's monetary and financial system, and it plays a very important role in the economic development of the region. And that is why the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is driving this payment system modernization. And our digital EC cash, Dcash, is a component of the strategic priorities in relation to the modernization of the payment system architecture. And this is done in order to reinvigorate ECCU economic development and growth and ensure continued stability. We know that the payment system and the whole idea of digital transformation is essential to improving competitiveness through interventions. And part of these interventions really are to look at technological innovations in the payment system. What we are providing is a secure, affordable, and accessible payment system that drives ECCU digital economy, reduces costs, enhances financial inclusion, and makes the monetary and payment system more efficient and secure for the region's economic development. Slide 3, please. Now, there's several gaps in the architecture of the current payment system, and you and I know them very clearly, but I'll just articulate a few. The first thing to do is cost and efficiency in the antiquity of the current architecture, which really retards the development and possibilities of the region in a digital ecosystem. And even if it's not digital, it is still these frictions that prevent persons from really having access to an affordable payment system to drive their payment goals. We know many businesses will say, I really want to go electronic and accept card payments, but I have small margins. And the cost to pay, whether it is 3%, 3.5% or more, as well as the additional costs, are really cost prohibitive to merchants. But it's not just merchants is the issue. It's we know the issues in relation to small payments. Many times you go into a store and they will say, you need to have a payment of $25 or more. And all of these other frictions that continue to keep us back and not allow us to move forward. So when you think about the next slide, one can see that the digital economy is worth trillions. And if we can leapfrog into the digital era with a very strong digital EC, which is what we have, but now going digital, then that provides that catalyst to really drive the digital transformation. It is estimated that 70% of all new value in the next decade will be on the digital enabled platforms. Not when I say next, in this decade, will be on digital enabled platforms. And so it's important for us to understand that we have to move in tandem with where we want to see our trajectory of growth and economic development. And this brings it home in the next slide, which looks at key global payment system trends. We recognize that while according to Facebook's DM's white paper, cash-based transactions still globally still account for about 85%, which really mirrors the region. We're around over 80% in cash-based transactions. But what studies show is that over the next 4 to 5 years, this digital ecosystem will make it such that about 50% or more of all payment transactions will be done via digital wallets. And that brings into the fore the issue of digital currencies. And when you're thinking about safety and stability that raises the bar to discuss a digital fiat currency, as we have with Dcash. And so think about $9 trillion annually in digital payments, looking at blockchain technology, peer-to-peer architecture, digital wallets, and the like. It's critically important that the region opens itself, and not just the OECS, but the Caribbean, opens itself to the issue of digitalization of its economy, not in a small sense of a few ICT. That's really leveraging digital platforms, but not really digitizing the economy. When we talk about digitizing the economy, we are talking about creating digital industries and really moving the economy forward. And if money makes the mayor go, then one needs money to be able to effect that catalyzing process of digitalizing the economy. Now, I want to show you the benefits on the next slide that looks at some of the benefits of having a digital EC currency and having a digital fiat currency in general. Now, we know within our region, we are open economies, and we depend on trade with the rest of the world, as well as trade with each other. At the micro level, what our Dcash, our digital EC allows for then is that peer-to-peer transactions to not only drive businesses, but drive within country, but drive business activity and money transfers in country and across our 8-member territory. And so it's very important when we think about this, we look at both the micro and the macro implications. At the micro level, we're talking about giving persons inclusion. We're talking about making sure that peer-to-peer architecture allows for ease and cost efficiencies. We're talking about the issue of moving the financial architecture to a new level to get to the transformation that we know we need in order to be able to be resilient and to be secure in our own economic space. And this will be achieved when we make sure that we have that digital path in order to engage in a competitive way with the rest of the world. We also look at stability and the issue of leveraging blockchain and the issue of transparency and making sure that the region continues to adhere to regulatory standards. And that immutability of the blockchain technology, where the data is not able to be erased, that it stands to the test of times and able to be audited, gives that whole auditability, transparency, and other qualities and characteristics that are required to have a safe and secure payment system architecture. When we think about these benefits, as shown in the next slide, it is not just governments or regulators who benefit, it's the individual consumer that now gets access, that now is able to do things in an electronic, a digital sphere that they weren't able to. They won't have to carry around a lot of cash, which exposes them to harm, attacks, and theft. They won't have to be open to the issue of loss of funds if they forget their wallet, because the whole security architecture makes sure that while your smart device is used as the interface to do the transaction, no funds are stored on the device. It's an account-based model as opposed to a token-based model. And this leverages that security, because from a fiat currency, one would not want that the money supply is hindered by that amount of leakage due to losses and the lack of recoverability. So one has secure, one has the safety, and one has the cost efficiencies and the ease of moving money from one space to another to effect one goals. And these same things obtain on the merchant side, be the merchant a government or be the merchant enterprise, a private sector enterprise, in that they're able to have business to business payments, business to government payments. One can understand in that digital architecture, you're reducing the cost of the paperwork, of the face-to-face, and bringing down one's cost means that one then has more funds to expand, to invest and reinvest, and to shape the business in a way that could not be shaped if one had to obtain a costly payment system architecture or one that depends on cash. In the next slide, I want us to recognize that from the central bank perspective, we have not supplanted ourselves within the intermediary function. That still obtains that two-tier where the central bank mints the currency, passes it on to financial services providers, and they are the user-facing entity to drive that engagement, that customer relationship management with the customer. And so that creates that continuity without, however, limiting the entry of new service providers. And the more competitive a financial system is the more robust, but also it benefits the users because now you have differentiated of services, you have new service platforms and new service and new products that can be built on top of those platforms. I want to just give you a little insight about how easy it is to use the Didacus. So for the next slide, please, I would want to just show you that we have made sure that the design looks at more than one pathway to be part of this Didacus ecosystem. We recognize there's some persons who don't have access to a bank or don't have a bank account, whether it's by choice or it's by design because of the cost frictions. You know, when one talks about the issue of access, it's not just the ability to have access, but the ability to afford the access and what does access bring. So when we talk about financial inclusion, our definition contemplates not only access, but the quantity and quality of access and the cost of access. And so for this, if you don't have a bank account or you don't want to affiliate with a commercial bank or a credit union, one can sign up with ID, and all they have to produce is one piece of ID to get access to a value-based wallet. And with this, then one has to physically link the exchange, the Dcash for the physical EC cash for Dcash. If one has a relationship with a commercial bank or credit union, one can maintain that relationship. All they have to do is sign up with a code. And with that code, they then activate their Dcash wallet and then are able to engage their financial institution on how to move funds from their deposit accounts to be able to convert into Dcash without them having to go physically into the bank. And it's shown up on the next slide where it shows the 3 easy steps. 1, 2, 3. The first one is to download the application, the app, just like one has a Facebook app or other apps. They can just download the app from whether it's the Apple Store or the Android Store. And then they can then activate that app either by getting a code from their financial institution, or they can register with ID by just engaging remotely. And all of this thing is remote. They can remote one of the authorized agencies that can allow for them to be onboarded to the system. And once they have done that, and they have made the exchange between their physical cash and Dcash, or from their savings or deposit accounts to Dcash, they can then engage merchants in order to scan a QR code, and as it is scanned, they confirm, and once they confirm the payment, then the payment is settled. And part of the idea, if you see the architecture, it's a payee driven. So the payee has to push. And not only do they push the payment to the recipient, they have to confirm. And this brings in a heightened sense of security architecture, because no one can confirm for you unless they have access and unless they know what your password is and they have access to your device. And so that brings an extra security. In the next slide, I want to look at some of the design principles that we as a central bank have adhered to in making sure that the Dcash meets our financial and stability architecture. And the first thing is that we want persons to know that this is easy to move one form of cash to another form. So it's the same EC. It is not any cryptocurrency. It is not a stable coin. This is EC currency, just in digital form. And so what that allows is seamless movement between the forms of fiat currency. The objective of the Dcash is not a savings instrument, so there is no interest bearing as one would have with these bank deposits. It is just for transaction purposes, and that allows the Dcash to be introduced without disintermediating the financial system, where banks accept deposits and then use those deposits to lend to other customers. So that deposit funding still goes on. This is akin to one just going to the ATM and taking off cash. Instead of having to physically go to the ATM, one can digitally or electronically do that and just spend what they need to spend within their budgetary means of what they spend. It is not a savings instrument, and it's not an investment instrument. So it's not a storage of value for any large transactions that will compete as well with government securities. The purpose is solely transactional. And it also honors safeguards that we have embedded in the design as core principles, limits and ceilings on how much Dcash one can transact in based on one's profile. You know, when you go to the bank, you have your know your customer, and you have your anti-money laundering, and you have your counter-financing terrorism. All of these are part and parcel of the Dcash ecosystem design principles. And then there is the ECCB, who is in charge of the monetary system. And so the ECCB determines, based on its policies and what it wants to achieve in monetary and financial stability, the quantum of digital cash and the quantum of physical cash that it will be able to manage based on where it wants the development architecture to go while preserving the financial system. So there is no plan to get rid of EC cash. There is no plan to get rid of EC physical cash. What is being designed and desired is to reduce the amount of physical cash consistent with an optimal level that will allow for an ease of doing business, payment system efficiencies, the digitalization of our architecture. But cash will always be a key component of the payment system. By providing options, what you have is a more robust system. So when persons say to me, what happens if electricity or internet goes, because it's internet based, cash will always be there. And so for the period, this is the architecture. But the good thing about the architecture, it is designed in a modular form. And so by modular, it means you add to that architecture as the needs and goals expand. So we started off with a point of sale system, and now we're moving into now an e-commerce component of this. And we'll continue to add components to this as demands and as needs, and as we maneuver within the monetary and financial system architecture with competitiveness, inclusion, and stability as our watchwords. I want us to look in my last two slides, the next slide, at what is happening globally, because we are not alone. 83 central banks, which represent the over 90% of central banks in the region, in the world, in the global economies, are doing some aspect of whether it's a central bank digital currency pilot, whether it's research or other aspects that will allow them to understand what benefits they can derive from a digital fiat currency. And so the Caribbean is leading the way. We have Bahamas, we have ECCB, we have Jamaica, and others that are leading the way in charting. And that shows the whole idea that, as the Jamaicans would say, we small but we talawa, in that we can punch above our weight. And that is what it is, that thinking that will drive the Caribbean economies and keep us competitive and resilient. That we're not limited by the size of our land space, only by our vision. And the last slide, therefore, I want to conclude by saying that change brings opportunities. In the next slide, change brings opportunities. And one has to look at this in where we are going in terms of the future, and to really look at the future and guide our future, because the future is now. What we do now impacts the future. So the future is not something distant. It is really now. But to make sure we guide that future in a way that benefits us and that we have control over, it demands vision, it demands change. And change means giving up some things that we were comfortable with, but it also demands innovation. It needs new ideas, new thinking, new ways of seeing the same glass, but with a different purpose. But it also needs collaboration and partnerships. And that is important, because unless we collaborate and partner, we will go fast alone, but we will go far together. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that very exciting presentation, Sybil. And again, I'm sure you're going to get a lot of feedback in terms of understanding, maybe even in terms of the OECS region itself, on just really how people can get on board with the digital currency. Well, from one OECS person to another, I'd like to welcome Dr. We have a recorded presentation from Dr. Didacus Jules, who is the Secretary General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. And he's going to share some insights and bring an update on the status of the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project of the OECS.
Chairman of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, the Honorable Melford Nicholas, Honorable Ministers of Telecommunications and ICT, Secretary General of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, Mr. Rodney Taylor, distinguished colleagues and friends. It is a distinct pleasure to deliver some thoughts on digital transformation in our Caribbean. The OECS contribution to this event will be presented in two parts. I lead the charge with some deliberate provocations to the prevailing canon, and my colleague Imran Williams will give some flesh to the OECS efforts to actualize the ideological, political, and conceptual constructs that I will outline. I have entitled this address, Caribbean Digital Transformation, Our Leadership Imperative, because after 30 years toiling in the regional vineyard, I am clear that transformation, whether digital or whatever, is not elementally a technology thing. It is at core a mindset thing and a challenge of leadership. It starts when we emancipate ourselves from mental slavery so that we can have no fear of technology energy. In every reflection, context matters, and the omnipresent contemporary context is the pandemic. Its tale of terror does not require detailed cataloging, except to point out a few things. Its destruction of far too many lives, which is now worsening in the fourth wave. When will it ever end? The hemorrhaging revenue losses for big and small, the interminable disruption of value chains, and the irreplaceable, perhaps, job losses with the inevitable retrogression into poverty. The big picture outcome of all of this is that the pandemic, compounded by concurrent catastrophes, has accentuated the systemic problems that have historically plagued us and kept us in a condition of structural underdevelopment. These impediments span several domains: technological, as in inadequate technological infrastructure, insufficient local capacity; regulatory, as in outmoded legislative and regulatory frameworks; socioeconomic, as in inequity and the digital divide; and logistical, structurally compromised local ecosystems and supply chains, just as all trade goods have been subjected to. Then sectoral, in education, in healthcare, in manufacturing, digital payments, intellectual property protections. And lastly, adaptation challenges. The majority of businesses face significant challenges in scaling up and adopting emerging technologies. A core issue spotlighted and intensified by the pandemic and the constriction of global trade is our dependence on imported goods and services of all kinds. The impact of that has been most severely felt in the domains of food security and technology dependence. At the root of this is the mindset that doubts one's own capability, a paralyzing and debilitating psychological condition. As debilitating as the pandemic has been, it has also presented a significant opportunity to address long-standing gaps in public and private sector transformation at a pace that is truly unprecedented. We were forced to do in 2 months what we had spoken about for 20 years to incorporate ICT in education, for example. The pandemic has not been a passing cloud. It has been far-reaching and a possibly permanent alteration to our way of life. In the new normal, digital technology is now a ubiquitous part of the contemporary life. People are undertaking more of their lives online, interfacing with government, ordering packages through digital platforms like Amazon, and staying in touch with family and friends through social media and video chats. Numerous organizations have moved their operations to the web and are focusing on providing digital products and services. I believe that we are yet to adequately apprehend the disruptive scale and the long-term impacts of these changes. Prior to the pandemic, we studied at home, we worked at our workplace, worshipped at church, exercised at the gym, and home was simply our place of family retreat and rest. Today, we study at home, work at home, worship at home, exercise at home. The home is now the new center of gravity of our existence. And digital technologies is a portal that facilitates the conduct of life and livelihood. Essentially, therefore, circumstance has forced and accelerated digital transformation globally and in the Caribbean. It is now the key to confronting our challenges and for seizing our opportunities. We have frequently heard the quotation that says, a crisis is too good an opportunity to waste. But its characterization of the nature of crisis is facile and somewhat unidimensional. I prefer the more sophisticated Chinese quotation that describes a crisis as, and I quote, an opportunity riding the dangerous wind, end of quote. Yes, there is opportunity, but this gift of potential is riding an untamed wild beast. And while there are no guarantees of success, the topography of that journey is discernible enough. The simple reality is that Caribbean countries must craft a more fundamental, integrated, and synchronized approach to recovery planning. God knows it will take a superhuman whole-of-society effort for us to restore the broken fragments of our civilization. The simple truth, Truth 1.0, is that this effort must be erected on 3 pillars. 1, a digital foundation for the COVID-19 recovery. 2, enhance regional cooperation to survive in a relentlessly competitive and brutally insensitive world. And 3, increase investment in indigenous empowerment, because only we can shape our own destiny, and only we can guarantee the sustainability of our lives and societies. And these truths have been made self-evident and proclaimed for a long time by our prophets of song and street. As the mighty sparrow urged, and I quote, you put a hand and I put a hand, and we will see in no time at all, for big and for small, prosperity. And beyond the proclamation has been the practice in ancestral as well as contemporary spaces of collective, communal, and cooperative endeavor as the riding tide that lifts all boats. This is what has fueled our credit unions, the Susu, the Lenhan, our Kudme, our Teta Sam, the joining of hearts and hands to build together to create prosperity for big and small. The corollary of this is a fixation with things foreign, the fetish with imported models, the servile impulse to imitation, all resting on the fallacy that exceptional value only emanates from the metropolitan and that the local can never be global. This, my friends, is a contemporary reassertion of colonization. Colonization 4.0 is the devaluation of indigenous talent and capability, even when its intrinsic inventiveness has been demonstrated. Digital colonization is the trading of golden talent and solutions born of the soil for plastic digital beads on the shores of our own birthright, as happened in the time of Columbus. There are innumerable examples of this. It happens every time we ignore innovations born of native genius in favor of expensive imported solutions whose expense cuts even deeper with the necessary customization required for application to our context. It happens every time we walk right past Caribbean talent at home and in the diaspora to embrace the stranger of lesser capability, but of glibber speech and fancy address. In saying all of this, I must make it clear that the cautions and arguments being advanced here are not coming from a xenophobic space, nor do they represent a case for the embrace of mediocrity or for solutions of lesser quality. These arguments are no different from what the geopolitical power blocks present as the prescriptions against procurement of goods and services from sources other than those approved by the donor. The caution is no different from the geopolitical security concerns that are advanced by many countries who prohibit the purchases of services, hardware, and software from particular entities or countries because of the imagined or often real vulnerabilities of dependence that this implies. There are some real stories that can be told. These tales should be cautionary because they speak to the seduction of international brand and marketing, to our own technological gullibility, to the absence of self-confidence in our own inventiveness, and our unwillingness to take a chance on our own. Once upon a real time, the Caribbean Court of Justice established a not-for-profit regional agency dedicated to supporting the digitization of the region's justice sector, with a mandate to develop our human resource competencies and to build region-wide support systems using seed money from Caribbean governments. What are the extractive lessons from this initiative? The unusual endeavor by a regional bureaucracy to be entrepreneurial, a recognition of the value of digital transformation in streamlining processes, going paperless, reducing processing time, becoming more efficient in the administration of justice, and leveraging the regional scale to make it more economical and effective. The construction of this digital edifice by our own hands, using our own intellectual and financial resources. The contradictory reality is that our region pumps tens of millions of dollars annually into foreign software and services, whose costs are further exaggerated by customization requirements, versus the construction of a homegrown architecture built by the best and internationally recognized Caribbean talent to serve as a source of revenue to the justice system, rather than be a recurrent expense on the purse of justice. The dangerous winds of the pandemic helped to expose our dependence and vulnerability to external service providers, but it also proved the benefits of cost, function, and speed of deployment. The reality check exposes our cultural aversion to local solutions, an unwillingness to invest in homegrown sustainable solutions, and the dangerous embrace of Greeks bearing gifts. We continue to be oblivious to the disguised trade manipulation of development agencies pushing foreign solutions in bundled development deals. The strength of any culture is its capability for resilience in the face of adversity and its inventiveness in the face of limitation. In spite of, Apex, the CCJ solution, perseveres. In the digital world, resilience and inventiveness is what makes successful execution possible. And as Edison admonished, vision without execution is hallucination. In our region, we have a penchant for talk, but the volume of the discourse is no indication of the accomplishment of the intent. A real danger of this period is the conflation of talk for action, an unfortunate downside of the preponderance of virtual and remote communication in the pandemic. It is highly fashionable now for us to engage our Generation Z in innovation labs, hackathons, robotics competitions, to signal our commitment to defining our digital future. And these are laudable, but they are not enough. And the authenticity of our intent must be validated by programs and mechanisms that will cultivate and grow these digital seeds to full scale and full sail fruits of innovation. That is how we transform from the export of fruit to the export of digital goods and services. At the CARICOM level, we have subscribed to the importance of a single ICT space. The challenge that we have faced is how to give it meaning, how to move beyond cliche to tangible reality. The word must be made flesh. Imagine the possibilities if we make the Caribbean community a truly virtual space. If we do, then we can supersede all the physical impediments to our integration. The real power of a single ICT space is hinted in this quotation from Jonathan Livingston Seagull. He says, overcome space, and all we have is here. Overcome time, and all we have is now. We can shrink our space, we can shrink our geographic space, while reaching out beyond our boundaries. For this ambition to be realized, there are several outstanding questions that still need to be answered, and I pose them for our urgent but careful consideration. Is there a commonly agreed regional position regarding the single ICT space? How do we secure meaningful political commitment to it? How to accelerate needed policy harmonization and transformation? How to best fund and synchronize current initiatives and vehicles? And how to keep actors accountable? There are three additional questions that must occupy the regional ICT fraternity. What is the true measure of the region's growth and investment potential? How can Caribbean technology practitioners be engaged in the most useful and impactful ways? And how can short-term COVID-19 digital responses be translated into a sustainable, long-term value creation for the region? Implicit in these questions are a host of practical tasks and actions that we can and must undertake for the actualization of our potential. They include simple initiatives within a digital ecosystem that makes life simpler, easier, cheaper, or resolves bureaucratic nuances in the public square. For example, regional or national portals for small businesses, apps to link the services sector with the government, provision of TVET certification training for individual skill providers, for example, barbers, artisans, plumbers, you name it. A facility to incentivize tax payment online with a 1% rebate on taxes. Job creation for app development. Portals for making available uniform key information. encouragement and incentivization of digital services. For example, a bureau run by young people digitizing information for the private and public sector. New value chains in health, agriculture, tourism, the destination business. Develop regional policies for co-creation with telecoms providers. A simple truth 2.0 is that there are 3 things we need to do to achieve our vision. 1, chart the way, for which we need to educate, equip, and empower. 2, enable the way by enhancing our laws, policies, and infrastructure. And 3, make the way through faith and confidence in ourselves and by boldness of action. My colleague Imran will speak to what precisely we are doing at the OECS to create this structural, ecosystemic, and mind shift transformation necessary to survive in the next normal. The areas of concentration of our efforts at the OECS include in education, digital libraries, local content included, and portals for distributed multimodal learning. In tourism, reskilling, online courses, standard setting. In technology, digital transactions, connectivity, cybersecurity. In agriculture, an online marketplace. In health, upgraded digital procurement platforms. In social empowerment, crowdsourcing opportunities, especially with young persons. And parenthetically, we do have a massive unrecognized ICT incubator to do this. And it's called the education system. Our education system is that colony where we can liberate the creative energies of our youth to do the most inventive and innovative digital happenings. I end by reminding us that technology is not the essence of the challenge. Our challenge is and has always been a question of human agency and the will to transform our condition. Bevel Wooden, one of our own, sadly unsung luminaries, asserted, and I quote, he says, technology itself is never the reason things change. How people choose to apply technology is the real catalyst of development. We have an opportunity now to ride the dangerous winds, to propel us to altitudes that we have never previously attained. Shall we take the ride, or shall we remain bruised and battered, seeking to simply seek shelter from the storm?
What an absolutely riveting presentation by Dr. Didacus Jules of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. SG, he did not disappoint. And the OECS has led in so many ways. I remember the early days with ECTEL, when it was the whole deregularization taking place. They led the way in the region as part of the sub-region. The digital currency, the common passport. This was absolutely riveting. You know?
It was, and I was actually following the chat and taking notes and getting some feedback as well on the side as the presentation was being made. So always intriguing. I met with him just a few weeks ago. We discussed opportunities that we could work more closely together, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I was very intrigued by his presentation this afternoon.
You know what Dr. Jules, what comes to mind is really, no matter what we have, all the toys that we have, all the tools that we have, all the digital natives that we have, it really comes down to the philosophy. It really comes down to what it is, who we are, and what it is that we want for ourselves.
Exactly.
And the ease, the equip, the empower, the enable. And then he said that saying, education, the education system is the colony to unleash all this potential. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Very poetic. And it gels very well with the presentation by Dr. Babb, who spoke about accelerating Caribbean innovation.
Yeah.
And how do we nurture our local talent and export to the world, as Dr. Jules pointed out. So
yeah, and of course, Mr. O'Brien, Dennis O'Brien, gave us a lot of food for thought, and somebody who's heading a big conglomerate, you know, a big tech company or ISP himself, it means when he's at the table and people like him at the table, it changes the tenor of the conversation with some of these big issues with which we have to grapple in terms of the big tech companies and the sort of power and influence and so that they wield. And some really serious food for thought there.
Indeed,
Yeah.
and that's why we are pleased to have companies like Digicel, companies like Facebook as part of our members, as
Yeah.
a, you know, as private sector
Give them the
members.
boxing gloves.
And you know, we're happy to hear to work out the policy that works in the interests of our citizens.
Yeah,
So,
great.
you know, we must provide a space for everyone.
Right, well, it's that time of the afternoon where we say it's I'm so glad we had the time together.
Yes.
I'd just like to quickly again make mention again and thank the sponsors of the CTU's ICT Week 2021, Platinum sponsors Huawei and Liberty Latin America, Cable and Wireless, Gold sponsors Cloud, Carib and ARIN, Silver sponsors Digicel, TSTT, Viasat and LACNIC, Bronze sponsors ICANN, Cullen International, the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, TAT, and live stream partner, Internet Society. And I know you want to share some news about what's coming up in the next big open session that we have, SG.
I certainly do. Today was very intriguing. Wednesday promises to be even more intriguing. Tomorrow we actually have a closed session where the ministers discuss, who formed the General Conference of Ministers for the CTU. We'll have a closed discussion on the business of the CTU. But the platform remains open. The Hubilo virtual hosting platform remains open to participants to interact with each other, interact with the quizzes and so on. And on Wednesday, we have a full day. We have a keynote address from a former CEO of Best Buy International, Mr. Robert Willett, and he'll be speaking about COVID-19 and the shift to digital and bringing a global perspective to that. And as I mentioned, we'll be talking about the Caribbean as a mecca for digital nomads. So with all of this remote from home, remote work, how do we attract persons to the region? And of course, we must have the necessary infrastructure to support that. We will also, Dr. Babb will be back with us tomorrow, actually moderating a panel on tech solutions for a region, sorry, not tomorrow,
Wednesday.
My apologies, Wednesday, tech solutions for a regional travel bubble. We will have a presentation from moderated by Junior McIntyre on pathways to a CARICOM digital identity as a public good. And we will have several presentations following that from our sponsors, Huawei, Viasat, Cloud Carib, Digicel, TSTT. And we'll end on Wednesday with an interactive discussion on rural connectivity policy with one of our partners as well, the Alliance for Affordable Internet. So we really look forward to that discussion on Wednesday.
That looks like a lot crammed into one day. So what, we're starting at 6 o'clock in the morning?
No, we're starting at 9 a.m. sharp. You know, we again apologize for the technical glitches today, and we hope for smooth sailing on Wednesday.
Great. So I think we've had a really fantastic day, and I've certainly enjoyed myself just being this sort of vicariously being through all of the panels. And I know that you wanted to also reiterate your own special thanks to your sponsors, because without them.
Indeed. We thank, as you mentioned, our platinum, our golds, silver, bronze, for others supporting our streaming partners, Internet Society. Without you, we would not have been able to host this event this week, and we certainly want to thank our ministers who participated in this afternoon session, as well as our members of the Executive Council. And of course, to you, our online audience who stuck with us through the technical glitches. We appreciate that, and we want to see you back on Wednesday.
Right, so all that's left for me is to say thank you once again. I'm Josanne Leonard, wishing everyone a safe afternoon, wear your masks, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday promptly at 9 o'clock. Don't forget to go look at the platform, move around in it, and there was something about some interactive games and...
Yes, and there's a leaderboard, so the more you interact, then there's some prizes which we will announce on Wednesday as well. So,
okay, great. So have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us.